so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war and poverty. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. Cause they're the ones who's coming up and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. Oh yeah, the world won't get no better.
All right, hello and welcome everyone to today's installment of Leading with Justice, our speaker series. We're so excited to have you today. Today we're going to be hearing from Dr. Mark Warren, and we would love it if you would share a quote or inspiration or thought for today on our social channels. You can tag it with the hashtag Leading with Justice. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. A quick little bit of housekeeping. We have our closed captioning enabled. If you'd like to turn that on, it's the CC button. We also have ASL interpreters on the call today. And we are going to be using two areas to connect with everyone. In the chat, we would love to hear your thoughts, inspiration, favorite quote, if you have any technical questions. And then if there are any special questions for the panel, those can be added to the Q&A so that we can add them into our section. We would like to begin today with a land acknowledgement. Legacies of soil and sovereignty. We express gratitude to the Nisenan people, who are the first peoples and traditional stewards of these lands on which we live, work, and learn on. We acknowledge that much of the economic progress and development in the US resulted from enslaved African labor and the underpaid and exploited labor from immigrants. We honor the legacies of resistance of these ancestors and contemporary freedom fighters. In the chat, we would love if you would share your name and what land you reside on. You can use the website that's listed here, www.native-land.ca, to find what native land you currently reside on. And if you'd like to take it a step further, we also have a donation link here that you can use to return Indigenous land to Indigenous people. And with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Vajra Watson, Faculty Director for the EDD Department.
Peace, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Vajra Watson. I'm the Faculty Director of the Doctorate in Educational Leadership in the College of Education here at Sac State. Since the fall of last year, we've been organizing a speaker series called Leading with Justice. We made a conscious decision to try to develop community spaces inside our pandemic. The pandemic is a portal, Arundhati Roy teaches us. She explains, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Inspired by Arundhati's words, we developed a series focused on anti-racist leadership and learning. Thousands of people from around the world participated. Today's Lunch and Learn is our final session together for all this work and all this time. I'm compelled to name the speakers thus far because they have paved the way and led us into our closing conversation. There is no greater scholar to end our series than Professor Mark Warren, alongside local organizers and school leaders who are on the front lines of this fight for racial justice. We will hear from them shortly, but before we do, where did we begin our Leading with Justice journey? Dr. Rich Milner at Vanderbilt University launched the series on October 7th, 2020. He spoke to us about using an opportunity gap framework to improve educational outcomes. Next, we engaged with Dolores Huerta, the civil rights icon who urged us to walk the walk, to extrapolate anti-Black racism from our lives. Building on her work, the following week, Lisa Romero brought Assembly member Jose Medina He discussed his fight to bring ethnic studies into schools. He told us, quote, "It's important to teach a complex history. Otherwise, it's an incomplete history." Boom. Then we're with the famous scholar activist and former dean of USF, Kevin Kumashiro. He taught us that great learning is an undoing. Next, we went on to engage with the Queen Supreme, none other than the one and only Gloria Ladson Billings. She implored us to have a hard reset. Next, Dean Maureen Gillette, co-founder of Grow Your Own in Chicago, brought us back down to the nitty gritty when she told us, "Show me your budget and I will show you where your priorities are." To move us into this school year, Frank Adamson and Oakland School Board member Mike Hutchinson discussed school closures and the politics of trying to protect children, learning, and public education. Who has carried this torch, this fight, longer in the academy than Dean Pedro Noguera? He spoke to us about schools of education working for the community and his vision for USC. As we continue to localize the lessons, Daniel O'Connell and Scott Peters brought us to the land, specifically the Central Valley. They discussed higher education and big ag, as well as the activists who show us how to reclaim our relationship to the earth and one another. Land is life, and land is political and ideological. We learn this in settler colonialism, which is why we needed Lee Patel at that very moment to further complicate the reckoning between settler colonialism, white supremacy, higher education, and an education for liberation. To manifest freedom schools, Lee Patel discussed these legacies and these legacies of Black freedom fighters that brought us to the next week with Dr. Jarvis Givens, who took us on a journey with his talk and new book, Before Anti-Racist Teaching, Carter G. Woodson, Black Educators and Resistance. He demonstrated the how of fugitive pedagogy. Dr. Kenjis Watson continued to push us even further to consider an apocalyptic education. And last Wednesday, Dr. Casey Wong followed with an interdisciplinary intellectual remix of Sylvia Wynter, Wu-Tang, and Frantz Fanon. All of these experts have led us to today, the here and now, with all of you inside this Lunch and Learn, a meeting place between theory and practice, policies and people power, scholarship and service. I consider Mark Warren one of my greatest teachers and comrades because he embodies the work and is a relentless freedom fighter. Mark Warren is a professor of public policy and public affairs at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. He is a trained sociologist and community engaged scholar who studies and works with community, parent, and youth organizing groups seeking to promote equity and justice in education, community development, and focuses on American democratic life. He has co-founded several networks promoting activist scholarship, community organizing, and educational justice, including the People's Think Tank on Educational Justice, the Urban Research-Based Action Network, and AERA's Community and Youth Organizing Special Interest Group. He's won so many awards, including a Guggenheim Fellowship. He is married to the amazing Roberta Udo, a Boston Public Schools teacher, and together they have raised two beautiful daughters. Now, Mark Warren is the author of 6 books, most recently, Willful Defiance, that just came out, The Movement to Dismantle the School to Prison Pipeline, which is part of why we're gathered today. On page 8 of this book, he writes, "There are simply 2 worlds of American public education. What many white people fail to realize, however, is that the unacknowledged phenomenon of the school to prison pipeline buttresses the system of white supremacy upon which their own world rests, and that provides the privileged education their children receive." We are all implicated. This is a mic drop moment. Are you ready? So to get us started, we have a poetic foundation. Says director Patrice Hill and says associate director Denisha Bland created this particular poetic piece to honor Mark's new book, Willful Defiance. The poetic service announcement will be followed by Mark's walk-on song, Bob Marley's Redemption. So let's get this going. Thank you for your patience as I said all those words, and over to the poetic service announcement now.
They don't care if our babies thrive at school, long as they get by at school. Get by institutionalized racism and intergenerational oppression systems that keep prison pipelines thriving. Disguised as willful defiance, I'm trying to understand why urban schools have the highest rates of incarceration instead of culturally relevant curriculum that should be liberation. Suspensions from school feel like eternity. Strategically guide the black and brown kids out when we truly come to school to get free. Stifle academic and social emotional education. I'm just saying, could this be racially motivated? Outcomes being primarily black and brown youth become academically stagnated, leading to suspensions, expulsions, less school participation, stereotypes perpetuated. Is your school pedagogy discipline or human elevation? Discipline data from the Department of Education found that black girls are 5 times more likely than white girls to be suspended at least once from school. This data infuriating when black girls are 7 times more likely to receive multiple out-of-school suspensions. Where is the healing, motivation, and rebuilding? How do we stand in our confidence after it has been disciplined away? How do I come to school ready to learn when you are trying to strip my intelligence and make it seem like I am insane? Black girls are 3 times more likely to receive referrals to law enforcement when white girls are getting away with behaving the same way. And we already know what they are doing to black and brown boys. It's insane. Just check the data, it's been staying the same. I mean, steady increasing is definitely a shame. Do we want to teach black boys or do we want to lead them away to trajectories that don't lead to school or higher education degrees? Schools act like they are paid to lead them to the police when it's supposed to be a safe haven to keep youth off the streets. Expand opportunities, increase chances to succeed. Shouldn't school be focused on how to keep young people engaged and excited to be in their seats? Stop mistaking our pride for reasons for us to collide with suspensions, infractions, eventually leading to the police. We try to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. It's definitely time for us to get free. Who their students are and the environment they are living in. What students have to go through when they go home and live through before they can make it back to school again. Have you taken the time out to comprehend the life experiences of the children you are teaching and how your experience greatly differs from them? We have to remember school can empower or be a major hindrance. Is your school pushing towards prison or the most beautiful existence? The difference is we fighting for educational justice. Trust us, we won't stop until our babies get free. Educational liberation means we have to fight for what we believe. You can't suspend the truth out of our youth. You can't expel a generation that's meant to prevail. We demand an education where we can be more than our ancestors' wildest dreams. We want to go to school and truly be free.
Can somebody explain to me why? As soon as we enter the room, the teacher says bye-bye. We not getting paid enough. Why should I care for kids that don't care for self? That's just one last brother we have to worry about getting well. Can somebody explain to me why young sisters is being suspended disproportionately, hand-bound and kicked out of school for throwing attention tantrums, sent out on Zoom for sending messages? Pipe down, little black girl, you're too domineering. Pushed out, harshly disciplined, over-criminalized, school not made for a black girl to shine. Can somebody explain to me why? All my beautiful black and brown faces sitting in courtrooms over classrooms. Juvenile offenders, minor underage, facing life rather than graduating. Something is wrong with this country's education.
Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Warren. I use he, his pronouns, and I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm apparently in incredible company, having some really strong activist scholars come before me. So I'm honored to be here today, and I want to thank Vajra for inviting me. She is a former student, but a friend and a colleague and a comrade in the struggle for educational justice. I'm also really happy to be here with the panel because I never like to speak alone on this topic, because I think that the solutions that we need to find are going to come through various people doing the organizing, speaking for themselves, and finding places and spaces where we can come together, bringing educators, scholars, organizers, parents, and students together to come together to find the solutions that we need. So I appreciate this opportunity, and I'd like to share with you today some of my thoughts coming from a 6-year community engaged research project that I've been doing on the grassroots movement to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline that I did in deep partnership with organizing groups and national alliances who are working to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline, including the Dignity Schools Coalition, the Alliance for Educational Justice, and many organizing groups around the country. So let me start by trying to share my screen and see if that will work. So it doesn't seem like it's letting me play the slideshow. So let me stop again and try one more time. Well, let's try it anyway, and you can tell me if it's working. So great. The book in my research starts off with the story of Zakia Sakarwa-Jabbar, who you see pictured here. And Zakia was a working single mother at the time, back in 2014 in Dayton, Ohio. And she went back to college to try to get a degree, and she put her son Amir in preschool. And she says this: "The problems began right away. The preschool gave me a hard time enrolling him in the first place. Then in the first week, I started to receive phone calls telling me, quote, he had a temper tantrum today. He's not wanting to transition from one activity to another. Is that not normal?" I replied. "Is that not something that your teachers can deal with?" Then the preschool asked me to have Amir evaluated. Evaluated for what? It was as if he was a guinea pig. They made normal 3-year-old behavior sound very pathologized and abnormal. And I realize now that I don't think we were ever really wanted there. Well, Zakia refused to have him evaluated, and the preschool suspended him repeatedly and then eventually expelled him. She enrolled him in 2 other preschools that also repeatedly suspended and expelled him. And she had to withdraw from college to take care of him. But before she did, she went to the college library and did a literature research on Black boys in education. And she found that actually her son's experience was not unique at all. And she started talking with other African-American parents in Dayton, Ohio. And so many of them had had the same experience, that their bright, intelligent, even precocious Black sons were being disciplined and punished, even starting in preschool, rather than cultivated and supported. She ended up meeting with these parents and co-founding an organization called Racial Justice Now with Vernelia Randall, and organizing Black parents in Dayton. She and joining the National Dignity in Schools Coalition, they were able to, in a few years, win a moratorium on pre-K suspensions in Dayton, Ohio schools, change the district's code of conduct to end zero tolerance policies, won the implementation of restorative justice in 10 schools in Dayton, and issued school report cards for school districts across the state of Ohio. Even despite these gains though, when I interviewed her, she reflected on the depths of systemic racism in this way. And she said, Amir is in the 4th grade now, and this school year has been one of the most difficult. No matter what I do, I can't make the teachers see us differently. I can't make her love Amir. I can't make her see him as an energetic 9-year-old boy who has some leadership qualities that she could cultivate instead of viewing him as a menace or a nuisance. And I start my talk and the book this way for several reasons. First of all, I think it's important to center the experiences and the voices of African-American parents in the movement to end the school to prison pipeline. Certainly students are at the center of that movement, but we often forget about the parents who are often deeply affected by the trauma that's inflicted on their children. And when they try to stand up for their children, are often excluded and abused themselves. And it points to the need, the title Willful Defiance, in a way is trying to flip the script, because as you may know, hundreds of thousands of students across the country have been suspended for something called willful defiance, or sometimes called disrupting school. Wearing your hat backwards or not taking your hat off can be called willful defiance. You can be suspended for that. In some states, you can be criminally charged or charged under civil penalties for quote unquote disrupting school. And flipping that over, what we're saying here is that parents and students need to willfully defy a system that has really been set up to discipline, control, and punish them. And this is a book about that willful defiance, not as an individual, but as working together with other parents and young people to create this movement. I also start the book this way because I think it raises the question, how did small, under-resourced community organizing groups like Racial Justice Now, as we will see, change discourse, policy, and practice across the country? And I think the two themes that I would like to look up and probably talk more about the first one today is the vital importance of people who are most impacted being at the center of the movement. Parents and students of color being at the center, their voice and their leadership and their solutions driving the movement. Secondly, the importance of local organizing groups like Racial Justice Now coming together across the country and creating a national movement, being joined by scholars, by educators, by advocates to create that national movement, but one that's not focused and dominated by professional advocates in Washington, but instead one that is directed at supporting, spreading, and what I call from what I've learned from Jitu Brown, another organizer in Chicago, nationalizing local struggles. I don't want to talk too much about this today because I know we don't have that much time, but as Vajra mentioned, I consider myself a community engaged scholar. And the reason I do this work is because I believe that our current system of policymaking, of scholarship, and of education policy is broken. It's dominated by researchers and scholars who study communities from above, then offer solutions to educational leaders who then often deliver them down onto schools and communities. And instead, I believe that many of the solutions that we need have to come through the active engagement of people on the ground level. In my case, parents and young people who are organizing to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And so when I set out to do this research, I set out to do it in deep partnership with those organizations that are leading the struggle, because I believe that it's important for my scholarship to be relevant to these solutions and to be accountable, not just to other academics or to educators, but to be accountable to people who are most impacted by injustice in the first place. And so this project has been going on for 6 years. We also created a toolkit of resources for community groups to use to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. We created this book, and we also formed together the People's Think Tank for Educational Justice, which I'm happy to talk about some more. And I'm deeply aware of my positionality, my location as a white male sociologist and professor. And it's unfortunate that the history of my profession, white male sociologists have studied Black communities and perpetuated stereotypes and done real harm to those communities. And I'm committed to finding ways to hold myself accountable to those communities for the research that I do. I want to talk a little bit, I'm not going to talk too long about what the school to prison pipeline actually is, but I think I would like to make 2 points about it. First of all, it's not simply a set of misguided policies, zero tolerance discipline policies that call for suspensions or expulsions of students for a wide variety of very minor behavioral issues or policing practices in schools. It's really part of the larger system of mass incarceration in this country, and it arose at the same time as what Michelle Alexander called the new Jim Crow that led to the incarceration of over 2 million people in this country, the majority of which are Black and brown people, mostly men, but also growing numbers of women. And secondly, that what I think has not been particularly appreciated about mass incarceration is that mass incarceration actually begins in school. Most young people report that their first contact with police often happens in school. A study in North Carolina showed that 40% of the first contact of people, of Black and brown people in the juvenile justice system happened in school. If you are a Black man who has failed to graduate from school, has been pushed out of school, your chances of ending up in the in prison are 2/3. So 2/3 of all Black men without a high school degree will end up in prison at some point in their lives. And thirdly, it is not widely recognized just how many African-American children have parents who are in prison. One study that was done in Black children born in 1990, by the age of 14, 25% of them had a parent who had been in prison, 25%. And so what we're looking at is the mass incarceration of parents, and then the discipline and policing practices in schools that then criminalize their children. However, my focus of my research is not so much on the workings of the school to prison pipeline, but it's important to understand how it is really part of a deep-seated system of white supremacy in this country, to then understand why we need a movement led by people who are most impacted if we're going to change it. And I think what is striking is that we talk about the school to prison pipeline. It's a term that many people know, most educators now know, many people in the public know. That was not the case 15 or 20 years ago. The identification and the first challenges that were made to the school to prison pipeline was not identified by educators. It was not identified by scholars. It was not identified by the traditional civil rights community of professional advocates. It actually was named and challenged in Black and brown communities by parents and young people in local communities around the country. And I actually traveled to Holmes County in the Mississippi Delta, one of the poorest counties in the country. And in 1996 and 1997, Black organizers working with parents and young people named what they called the schoolhouse to jailhouse track. And it was one of the first places, and they organized to challenge it. They saw young people out in the street during the day. They started talking to young people, finding out that they were suspended for very minor infractions and found themselves in the juvenile justice system, and then railroaded into so-called training schools, which are actually youth prisons where young people were horribly abused. In one case, Black students were on a bus throwing popcorn at each other, and a popcorn hit the back of the white school bus driver, and she drove the bus straight to the police station. And 7 African-American boys were arrested and charged with criminal assault for the incident. Through the organizing efforts, the charges were eventually dropped, but those students ended up being pushed out of school through the expulsion process. So I start there because I think it's very important. What does it really mean? What is the significance of the fact that the school to prison pipeline was really identified and challenged first by people who are most impacted, that their voice and their participation was really at the center of the movement to change this? I think then in this book and in my work, I traveled around the country to try to look at how local communities organized. And in fact, the first place that the first policy change and blow that was struck against the school to prison pipeline happened as a result of Black and brown parents who organized in South LA with an organization called Cadre. And in 2007, they won a change to district policy to implement school-wide positive behavior and supports. That victory resonated across the country and inspired people to organize in other places. I went to Denver, where young people, students, Latinx students, and a group called Padres and Jóvenes Unidos were the first in 2008 to win district-wide change in the code of conduct to end zero tolerance. It was the first place that zero tolerance was taken out of a district code of conduct. And it was the result of organizing efforts by young people who did find allies eventually in amongst educators and some other people, but were opposed almost across the board by the local teachers unions and many other lobbying efforts. So I tried to chart the sort of dynamic between local organizing and the rise of a national movement. And I take a look at the formation of the Dignity in Schools campaign, because I think the problem is that even when parents and young people's voices and participation at the center, they are often usurped by the greater resources and status and financial resources of professional advocates in Washington. So I think it's very important that this movement was built primarily and first by parents and young people, and then brought in scholars and professional advocates. And there was actually a power struggle in this movement for who was actually going to control the movement. And a number of policies and procedures were adopted to try to hold the movement accountable to local groups. And I talk about a number of them. You can see some bullet points here, but I think that the movement became focused partly on federal policy, but mainly an effort to create resources for local groups to use, like toolkits, model code of conducts, and other kinds of resources. The school to prison pipeline and the movement to end it is actually quite a diverse and comprehensive movement. It emerged in some of the ways that I talk about, but as it grew and developed, it became an intergenerational movement. It became an intersectional movement. Black girls, gender nonconforming students, and girls of color really asserted their voice and their particular issues in the movement. We saw also the rise of the police-free school movement. Most people don't understand that in 2020, when the mass protest arose against police violence and racism in communities, and there was initial efforts and some victories to defund police in schools or to remove police from schools, actually the places that won those policy victories were places where young people particularly, but also parents, have been organizing for many years for police-free schools. 10 years ago, the Black Organizing Project in Oakland declared the goal of removing police from schools by 2020. And riding the wave of the protests, many of these groups like Black Organizing Project were able to do it. But I think it's important to understand that it took years of patient base building organizing work to create the foundation for the policy victories that have occurred across the country. 15 years ago, when this movement started, Zero tolerance was the law of the land. Zero tolerance, by which I mean schools would have zero tolerance for any form of student misbehavior, including things like willful defiance, which are entirely subjectively assessed and subject to racial bias. 15 years ago, zero tolerance was the law of the land. It was in federal policy. It was in almost every district code of conduct. It was in state law. Every national teachers union supported zero tolerance. All the major educational associations supported the policies of zero tolerance. Within 10 years, this movement has defeated zero tolerance, at least in terms of public discourse and educator discourse. Nobody will defend it except the most right-wing supporters will defend zero tolerance now. They also won a rolling series of victories at state and local levels. This has led to reductions in exclusionary discipline. Places where organizing and advocacy has been strong. Los Angeles in particular has had incredible reductions from 75,000 lost days of instruction to just over 5,000, and the beginnings to defund or remove police from schools. These are amazing victories. You know, when this movement started, the federal government actually issued an official position that there is no such thing as a school to prison pipeline in this country. That was in 2008. Within 6 years, the federal government issued new guidance declaring the need to end the school to prison pipeline and warning districts against racially discriminatory school discipline policies. Nevertheless, there are some really profound challenges that persist, and the school to prison pipeline remains in many ways deeply entrenched. We can see this both in the enduring racial disparities that continue despite the reductions in overall discipline, and also the persistence of police and policing practices and even new forms of surveillance that are occurring now with remote learning and with the pandemic. And finally, I wanted to end with the idea, the need to create authentic alternatives that really transform schools. And I want to end with that point, as I know I need to wrap up. The school to prison pipeline is not just simply a set of policies that need to be changed. We can't just think about implementing something like restorative justice as a program disconnected from anything else. What this movement is really calling for is a wholesale transformation of public education. Some people, we used to say that public education is failing in our urban schools and our low-income communities. But actually, in my view, I think public education is succeeding at exactly what it was trying to do, which is to reproduce the racial and class order in this country. And what we really need to do is transform the entire system away from white supremacy. And that means attacking the school to prison pipeline and policing practices in our schools. But it really means also looking for solutions for new forms of education that arise from communities, from parents and young people, community-based education, culturally sustaining education, supportive and liberatory education in our schools and communities. So I think if I want to leave you with one thought here at the end of this talk, is that we have an opportunity now, I think with the pandemic, to really question what are really the foundations of American public education in settler colonialism and in white supremacy. And if we really believe that, then we have to think in much larger ways about how we want to transform this system. And where should we look for an important part of that answer? And I think where we need to look is indicated by the school to prison pipeline, that those who are the most impacted by injustice have the clearest and deepest idea and focus and analysis of that injustice, and are offering community-based solutions for us to learn from and partner with today. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists about some of those analysis and some of that solution.
Man, just a round of applause, Mark, for centering this conversation, for all the work that you do. I'm going to welcome into the space our esteemed panelists. One of the quotes on the PowerPoint said, "There is no national without the local." So I'm really proud and honored to have some of our local heroes and sheroes with us today to talk about the work that they have and are continuing to do to bring to life equity in this region. And it's not easy, but there is joy inside this fight for justice. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in here. And Mark, you're welcome to stay on screen as a panelist as well. All right, Queen Lorene, if we can start with you to briefly introduce yourself, call out an ancestor that inspires you, and share with us a particular school policy that we need to organize to dismantle here in Sacramento.
Okay, so Lorene Pryor, Black Youth Leadership Project, an ancestor that inspires me, Fannie Lou Hamer, because I'm sick and tired of being doggone sick and tired. And so if I can talk about one policy, I don't think it's a policy. I think what we're talking about is education code in California. It's open to interpretation. So what you have is you have these people on these school campuses coming through and thinking about, okay, how I'm going to apply it. The problem that I have is they are not applying it equally across the board. And that is why where we live right now in Elk Grove, they're #1 in the state of California for disproportionate discipline of Black children. So when you hear me talk, understand it's no disrespect. I'm not talking about anybody else. I don't have it in my lexicon to say Black and brown. I do not do POC. I don't do BIPOC. I'm talking specifically about Black children and the issue that they are having in the educational system. So shout out to HGC Apparel, stop criminalizing Black children, because that's what we're about and that's what we're here to do.
Thank you. And thank you for lifting up all these subjective policies that continue to perpetuate white supremacy.
And this is, can I give you the specific one? The specific one is 48900. That is that's what they use for suspensions and expulsions in the state of California, Ed Code 48900. And there's many parts to it, but that is what they use. And your children, if you have not seen a discipline report, they're starting to look like rap sheets. So I would just want to put that out there.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to Tracy with something, similar in terms of if you can briefly introduce yourself, call out an ancestor that inspires you, but being as someone that's inside the district and are probably dealing day to day with the policies that Lorene just talked about, any kind of innovations or solutions that you have seen in your district?
Thank you so much, Dr. Watson, for having me here. My name is Tracy Noriega, currently serving the students of San Lorenzo Unified School District as Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and bringing into the space my mom, who is no longer with us, especially today on the day that she birthed me. So in terms of innovations, I wouldn't necessarily call them innovations. I think I want to call them mindsets. And it goes back to the conversations we've been having about ethnic studies and, and changing hearts and minds and trying to, to be upfront with white supremacy culture and settler colonialism. I give credit to my Director of Student Support Services, Dr. Ammar Sahili. He is actually the person I think you might have wanted to be on this panel, but he has been my director here in San Lorenzo Unified for the last 10 years or so. And he put in a number of different strategies, multi-layered, but definitely student and family centered. And I just want to name off a few. The aspect of restorative practices, right? What is it that you are actually trying to set up first and foremost? I have been at the high school the last 4 weeks because unfortunately I don't have a principal, and we've had teacher and sub shortages like many other districts. But as I'm walking around campus and I'm getting to know kids and I'm trying to, break up potential issues, the kids are not okay. And that's one of the first questions we ask. Are you okay? And you kind of catch them off guard because it's like, oh, why is she asking me, right? That she's supposed to be like this, administrator. But it comes down to that. Do we see our kids as people, especially, our Black students? In our district in 2008, there was over 3,000 suspensions. And in 2019, that dwindled to almost 800. So about 76% drop. So when we talk about setting up the climate and culture, setting up the belief, setting up the fact that, are you as a caring adult, do you truly care? We continue our professional learning, especially our racial equity work, because we want to get to what it is that we know, what are our belief systems, and how do we change hearts and minds, especially if those aren't our experiences, but we're in front of students, every day. We want to continue to empower students. So starting with our social emotional learning curriculum from day one, from the get, so that they can name actually what it is that they want to do. We have a board who has very much implemented and passed board policies that are anti-racist and protect our students and give our students that voice and empowerment. We've implemented a number of parent groups like AFAC, or African American Family Advisory Committee. And, as Dr. Warren says, it comes from the community. So our parents, guide us and tell us what they want to see, and we put those things into place. We have social workers to help connect and partner with our community organizations. We have school community liaisons who build parent ambassadors. So again, empowering our parents and giving them the tools that they particularly want and need to support their students and their student success. This year, our board was brave and we did not renew the MOU with the sheriff, the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. And so with that, we had work to do in terms of ensuring that our administrators knew what to do with police-free response, right? Going back to our restorative practices work, just continuing to build the relationships, especially with our students coming back into in-person learning after having been gone for so long. We are poised to, again, as I said, we continue professional learning. It is a main staple in our district, fully supported by our administrators, our staff, our labor partners, our board. And we are going to continue down this road with ethnic studies and ensuring that we're implementing not just the ethnic studies content classes, but how ethnic studies pedagogy looks throughout our school system.
Thank you for that. So turning to Sonia, could you also just briefly introduce yourself, call out an ancestor that inspires you, and discuss the type of work you think we need to be doing in Sacramento based on what you've heard so far, or maybe some of the wins you've encountered?
Yeah. I'm Sonia Lewis. I am the founder and CEO of Ascribe Educational Consulting and currently the director of Edify Humanity, our nonprofit arm. And so the ancestor that I would call out, Lorene stole mine because Fanny is, always a favorite, but I would definitely have to say Nina Simone, because it was in her dark skin that she was able to move crowds and gain the attention of all of those who thought that she was unintelligent and ugly. And so I come to you in the spirit of a Nina Simone. When talking about wins or ways in which we can leverage equity, I think that there are, I know that there are a few key factors that we as folks who are on the ground doing this work keep coming back to time and time again. One of those things is representation. And so if there's not a concerted effort from any educational organization to leverage the talent within communities, for example, Patrice's work, right? You're bringing in an artist, a person who has a connection to young people in community in these urban settings that they recognize and speak the language of. And so putting folks in position to represent, there's data and statistics around the sheer fact that having one Black teacher is not only going to positively impact Black students, it is going to positively impact all students, particularly white students. And so if we want to have conversations about ethnic studies and equity, we have to start there. But I would also talk about stakeholders. Like, there's an untapped power that we don't lean on, and that is the power of parents. I've done lots of close work with Lorene and community, and I can remember the past maybe 5 or 6 years working in Elk Grove and a group of parents showing up month after month, community meeting after community meeting, after all of these racialized terroristic incidences were happening in community. And it was the parents via the voices of their children who now were inspired because they felt that there is a platform or agency to feel confident enough to speak that truth. And so if we don't like muster in and build these relationships with parents. We see exactly how it played out in New Orleans when there were 23 suspensions of Black students in a 5-day period. And the moment that father showed up on campus, mind you, during COVID, mind you, during the time where they were limiting, contact and how you are maneuvering in the education system, and those suspensions stopped. And that's without law enforcement. And I also just for a note of clarification, law enforcement wasn't brought into the school system until segregation. So the moment that Black bodies were in these institutions and walls that included white bodies, now we have something that we need to protect. We have to protect property, something that the slave catcher system, law enforcement, has always done, right? We got to protect property, but now we also need to protect white lives. And so it is indicative and imperative that we stay the course, understanding what it means to be trauma informed, and then just doing revolutionary shit that's outside of the box. And I say that with the wholeheartedness of me. Like, if you are a history teacher and you know your textbook doesn't teach about Black history, Indigenous history, Latinx history, API history, Muslim history, it's your job and responsibility to bring that information into your students so that they see themselves in a positive light. So it's more than representation in the sense of people being, the resource in the classroom. It's also what we're teaching them in the classroom.
Yes, yes. So Sonia did bring up Patrice, so let's turn to her next. A brief introduction followed by an ancestor you want to call forth. Your question is, can you talk about the Project HEAL elective class and why that's a better investment than school resource officers?
Patrice Hill, Director of Sacramento Area Youth Speaks. Been doing work in Sacramento classrooms over the last 2 decades. My ancestor was Nina Simone, of course. Sonia got her, but I'm gonna go to Gwendolyn Brooks because she was a teacher and a poet and was able to document the times as well as the experience of Black folks through her work and brought it into the classroom. Your question, Project HEAL. Project HEAL is an accredited elective class that was piloted at Luther Burbank. Is in its 5th year of programming. HEAL stands for Healing, Health, Education, Activism, and Leadership. Why is that a better investment than school resource officers? When I started the Project HEAL class at Luther Burbank in 2016, I seen young people being arrested on campus and given records from fighting on campus, when we know that this is a process that only takes place in urban school districts, right? Folks are not getting records going to school in suburban communities. And so to piggyback on Sonia's point, having one Black teacher, and I see Marcus in the comments, having one great Black teacher, right? One Black teacher that is going to invest in care and support about that young person as if they were their own child, changes to the trajectory of students in classrooms. And Black youth deserve to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, in the discussion, in the teachers. And Project HEAL is a better investment because young people can find themselves in school if we give them the tools and the space to articulate their own stories, to become authors of their own lives, and to become agents of change. Young people in the Project HEAL class tell me all the time, like, Mama P, I can see you really love me. And I don't say it. I show them by showing up, by leading and designing curriculum where they can directly relate to it, where they can tell me their thoughts and what they're going through in a classroom space that's safe and supportive. And so I want to see more classrooms like Project HEAL exist, not only in Sacramento, but across the country. It shouldn't be an anomaly that there is classroom spaces that are centered in Blackness and centered in a critical pedagogy where young people see themselves reflected. Stop.
Okay, we getting fired up. We fired up. Brother Barry, can you also introduce yourself, speak the ancestor that you want to acknowledge in this moment, and talk about what you are seeing locally in all these different spaces, and what fight you want us to take up, and how we can support, and one other little ping if you want to go there.
And they went there. They went there.
They went there.
It's hard,
And
hard to follow up. They went there. But I
Yeah.
can say
Jump in.
the ancestor that I'm gonna put out there that's closely related to, I think, our young people's pain, anguish, and sensibility is Tupac Shakur. You know, the brother died at 25, as brilliant as he was. You know, the common analogy, he was talking about the rolls that came out of the concrete, right? And I think that's the children that we deal with and the surfaces in the community that we relate to. I think really the reality that I feel a lot of us are just kind of dealing with overall in many of these districts is the anti-Blackness, the culture of anti-Blackness throughout all these districts. This idea that African Americans must simulate to this thought process that white is right, as well as your Blackness is too Black. Only when it's on the football field, the basketball field, a dance routine, a cheer. And sometimes with the cheer, you gotta kind of, that's a little bit too much. You know what I mean? Let's ease it on back. But the white girls could do that. And, you know, we don't want you to twerk because you got a little bit of junk in your trunk. So you gonna twerk, right? So the similarities to these things are unfortunately the same things as I was growing up in high school. It's the exact same patterns, the exact same freeze outs. The unfortunate part of when I was growing up, nobody was able to speak for me. I remember when I was 17 years old, a senior in a high school in Marin County, Novato. And I had started my activism in a sense of when and going into the part of what Marcus was saying about when we have teachers, just because they Black, don't mean they attached to Black. Let's be very clear. And this teacher was egging me on and was like, you know, you need to support the Black Student Union. And he wanted me to be some kind of Malcolm X / Martin Luther King on a pretty much predominantly white school campus. So for 3 weeks, I was just revving up the kids during lunchtime, where before I was a clown. And next thing you know, I'm having these motivational speeches about us being in power and them using us and our Blackness. Next thing you know, a week later, I'm in the principal's office. I'm like, what's going on? They called me out, Barry Axius. And mind you, I was on a good, straight, narrow path because this is my senior year. I don't want no drama. I know I've been Mr. Chaos throughout my high school career. This is my 4th high school. I want to graduate without an issue. The white principal had me in that office with my Black advisor right there. And he must have beat me down and stripped all my Blackness. First thing he said, why do you sag your pants like that? Are you some kind of gangster that we have to deal with? I'm like, wait a minute. He's saying this to a 17-year-old? And I'm looking at my Black advisor, and he was silent as I was defending myself. And in this moment, they were trying to take out some of the more highly dysfunctional kids, and I was a part of that. They kicked me out for a whole month. I had to fight my way back. At this particular time, my dad was like, I was a boy that cried wolf. I finally turned 18 in that moment and said, you're on your own, young fella. I had to go through the district, advocate for myself to get back into the school. Then I went back to the school and I signed something which was negligence on my own part, a contract that said if I didn't pass every class, that they would kick me out. I would be expelled from this school. I'm feeling confident. I sign it like, yo, I'm finna go do it, you know, whatever. Had one teacher, Miss Manson, US history teacher, remember her like it was yesterday. I went to her. Mind you, we've had issues in the past. And I said, Miss Manson, I know I've been struggling in your class. I think I got everything for all the other classes. I've been doing extra credit. I was really wanting to make my family proud to graduate. I said, can I get extra work from you? I'm not too sure about this test. I've been gone for a month. So my learning curve isn't one that I can study by myself. This isn't no distance learning. This isn't no take textbooks home. I was just gone. She said, no, I think you'll be okay, Barry. You pretty much just need a D to pass and you'll be okay. I said, are you sure? Yeah. Of course, I went, I took the test, I got a D, showed me my grades. Unfortunately, Barry, because of your D and all your other grades, you didn't pass my class. So now my Black self was out in the snow going to my next high school, where I then went to a continuation and finally got my diploma. But the way I was set up and the way there was no advocacy, no parent that stepped up, because my dad, and then I'm not going to blame him, because I had done enough for him to be like, I've done all I could do. You're 18 now, figure it out. But when we talk about the power of having real leadership in these facilities, and for us who are on this line, because we facilitate and advocate for not only the parents, the students, but faculty members that voices are not heard, we need more people like us on these campuses on everyday basis, so these kids won't end up like me. Because many don't survive and use that as a tool to create change. I could have been scarred for life. And as you see from the passion, the residue still is on me, because every time I deal with a student, I think about how that kid's probably getting set up by administration, by faculty, by his own person that he or her trusts in that school who looks just like them, how they can utilize our own to trap us and be anti-Black for their own causes. To me, it creates a passion that I constantly say, we must be in every school district, and we're not coming in as volunteers, we're coming in as paid staff. Do you hear what I'm saying? Because when we come in and now you're giving us a little bit, what we're gonna do, we're gonna spread that wealth to someone else that may not be able to get into the door. Support those young people that may not have. What we're looking at is knocking on the door of being denied over and over, asking us to get whatever credentials. Our credentials and our credibility is the work that we've done and the work that we've shown. And the simple fact that we've also been in this anti-Black system, oppressive system ourselves. That's the credibility, that's the honor, that's the diploma or the degree I need to walk in, because I've been in the system already. So I know the game. Yeah. It's nothing new. So for us to really, I say, curve it, we have to attack the anti-Blackness and the simple fact that they make our Black students as well as administrators try to assimilate to fit their narrative, and always create, if there is not a Black student union, a strong Black student union that's tangible and that has power, has support, and has influence in all districts. These are the kind of things that I feel that we need to reincorporate, because imagine if we had a Black student union like we saw this past, what was it, Tuesday, right? Where we had these young people finally seeing that, wait, we can talk and not get in trouble? And they were just talking and saying, we want this, we want that. As soon as young Black kids see that there are people that are going to support them, you start seeing their magic present themselves. And we need to see more people like us serving our people.
So building on Barry's words, and I want to honor everyone's time in this Lunch and Learn and slowly start to close us out. I said time would go fast, because time is an illusion. And when the fire hits, we kind of come ablaze in and of it. So going back to our order, so starting with Queen Lorene, if you could share with us, and we'll just pass it on, you don't have to come back to me, we'll just pass it on to whoever spoke next. I think it was Tracy, then Sonia. What are you fighting against, and what are you fighting for, and what actions do you want everyone on here to take?
I think it's been said, we're fighting against this system of white supremacy, right? And the way in which they interpret the laws and the policies on the books, and how they're always more harshly interpreted when it's dealing with Black kids. So I'm fighting for Black children. period. That's what I do. I'm going to go through your laws. I'm going to go through your policies. And when I come into the room, understand that I'm prepared. I'm prepared and I know what it is that I'm talking about. And we can go back and forth, but understand we're not leaving until that young person is restored. So whatever we got to get to, however we need to do it, that's what we're going to do. That's the calling I believe is on my life. That's what I spend my waking days. I left my job, my cushy job, my safe job at the state capitol to walk away and come and do this full time because my community needed me. I'm a super volunteer. That's what I do. And so when I say that I'm fighting, understand that it's taking everything out of me. And what I need is for people to come alongside and fight with me. It's a thankless job. It's a tiring job. It's something when you have a family in crisis come in because their 9-year-old twins were suspended from school for harassing and intimidating a seasoned staff member. We got a problem if a 9-year-old can intimidate you. Maybe you don't need to be where you're at. And we have to have that conversation too. Or when a mother, her child was part of the lockdown here at Cosumnes Oaks and they went and pulled out all the Black boys out of class. We got to figure out, well, why did you do that? And we had this conversation yesterday, and I feel like I'm talking to a damn tree stump because you don't understand that I came in here prepared. I see your statement. I've talked to the student. I know what you were supposed to do because I've read your policies. So why didn't it happen? And now that it didn't happen, I want to know what your consequence is going to be because you're quick to give Black children consequences, right? I want the same energy. And so those are the things, and I'm not going to take up too much time. I'm going to pass it to Tracy, but I need y'all to understand it's real out here. That disproportionate discipline, it's impacting our children's self-esteem. It's impacting their desire to want to go to school. And then you have their parents who come into the room and you're talking over their head because they don't understand your policies. It's a problem. Go ahead, Ms. Tracy.
Thank you, Ms. Laureen. And I am right there with you. This is my 25th year as an educator, and it is my life's work to ensure that, you know, my children, that we us here on the screen get to see something different, right, in our lifetime. But I continue to work, and I think in terms of representation, you know, that's definitely another thing, along with everything that Ms. Lorena said, that I am fighting for. I think we need folks that understand it at all levels. So not just, you know, in the community, yes, in the community, yes, in the classrooms, yes, at all levels of administration, yes, on the school boards, yes, at the state superintendent's office, all up and down. You know, if we need this, if we're going to get to some change, we need it all over the place. So I look forward to working alongside folks and continuing to get our kids what they need. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, following behind these two. So you said, what are we fighting against and what are we fighting for? I would just come to you in the spirit of a Harriet Tubman and say that I am a debt collector, and the debts that I am ready to collect right now from this day forward is everything that my ancestors were denied so that youth in the future can thrive and not just survive. It's tired, it's tiresome, it's taxing, it's trauma, it's oppressive. Every day that we are living in a perpetual cycle of stress, waking up trying to wonder how we're going to maneuver through a system that is set up against us. And so my fight is for Black mamas. Black mamas who show up with an attitude. I am the mother of 6 beautiful Black boys that have come from my sacred womb. And so that looks like, for me, I want to challenge Mark to do a little bit more research when it comes to the school to prison pipeline. And let's change that narrative that it is now the cradle to prison pipeline, because they are tracking Black mothers from the time that they are conceiving until the time that they are giving birth. And so the prison pipeline is the foster care system. It is calling the police on our children. So the sheer ability to look at the big picture when we're talking about who is negatively impacting and limiting what that access to young people's ability to thrive. I'm a debt collector. I want it all back. You know, it's that old gospel song. I want it all back. It's there for us. You know, the last shall be first, and we here to collect all them bones.
I'm gonna go after that. The debt collector, come on, Sister Sonia. Yes, yes. I'm fighting for young people to have a stake in their own education, for their voices to be heard and valued, for critical youth decisions to not be made without young people being involved, where we can have classrooms that are liberatory, where classrooms are reflective of the young people that are sitting in the classrooms. I'm fighting for culturally relevant curriculum, for teachers to be trained properly in order to work with Black young people. I'm fighting for teachers to get healing so they can stop taking their traumas out on young people in the classroom. I'm fighting for our schools to stop pushing our young people out, to stop getting arrested at schools. And I'm fighting for our art to be valued and aligned with voices that are going to continue to do this fight and to do this work. And I want young people to be free, y'all. Poverty should not be a protagonist in our education, in our lives. And I want young people to know that there are people that are going to fight for them to the end, no matter what. Barry.
Fire, flame. I'm fighting and I'm praying that we no longer have gatekeepers holding us back from what liberation looks like, to what change looks like. I think one of the greatest and most unfortunate things that we have when we develop these ideas, curriculum, these fights, the allyships and things of that nature, we have bad representation. I call them bad Black negotiators. The Negro who will find his seat at the table and then make sure that we don't get our seat at the table when we think a little bit different and we're outside of the box in our ideology. And I feel that that framework has continued to show in many of our districts, because we have plenty of Black people in power positions to make critical change, and change don't happen. They'll put you a Black principal. And once you have a strong VP or someone else to that nature that speaks against the racist system that is our school systems across America, they get outed, they get isolated, and they get dumped. And then when you try to kick out or fire a blatantly racist teacher that says the N-word in front of her students, they get covered, paid vacation, and paid leave to where we don't know what's going on. True story, we've seen it. So this idea of some of these coalitions that the district creates and picks these needle-thin Negroes that come in our space to soundbite for those who think something differently than what we believe in, we no longer can have that. And I challenge those who probably have that label of the needle-thin Negro, that are those who are listening and probably saying, that ain't me. It probably could be you, because radical minds are no longer going to wait for master to say it's okay to be Black. We are going to be Black in our superiorness, in our excellence. So I pray for our future that they have more administrators that are willing to lose it all in order to push it forward. And we are here in our splendidness. Don't try to detach our Blackness. Celebrate our Blackness, not just on January 15th, on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, not just a few days in a month on Black History, because you're not going to do it all throughout the whole month. They're going to give you 2 days. Black History, let's go. Come on, we're going to do it for this week. And I know it's February. We're going to stop right here. We have to get these gatekeepers out of here, man. That's what the problem is, family. These gatekeepers, they are here isolating progress because they just want to be the ones that say they did it and they did it the white way. Not the right way, but they did it the white way. And I salute to all the parents and all the administration that continues to push it forward. But I want folks to be more aggressive and understand we are only a phone call away. And trust me, they don't want that kind of smoke. Understand, they don't want these kind of problems. And we state to state with it. So we just won't stay in Sacramento because we no longer want this conversation about Blackness to be this taboo conversation, this anti-Blackness conversation to be like, shh, don't say that. We can't say that. We want it to be full frontal because this is what it's always been. It has always been utilize the Negroes for their talents and their gifts and push out the rest of those Negroes who don't fall into that agenda. And we've seen it every day. We've watched it happen, and it's happened for too long. I would say the more radical thing is we need to create our own Black schools like Fortune and create more establishments like that, colleges, elementary school, high schools. That's my thought process, and I pray and I fight for that. But I know niggas, sometimes they love those privileged private white schools, so I get it. But I will say, into challenging them, make sure they create foundation that lets your child know it's okay to be Black. You are Black, no matter what they try to do and how they dumb you down, how they season you with whatever that white salt they got. You are Black, and you are Black excellence.
Thank you, Barry. I'm gonna turn the focus back to Brother Mark, and I know you've been listening intently. One of the pieces is that, you know, we've just, you know, experienced the frontline freedom fighters in Sacramento, to name a few of them, who continue to hold these schools more accountable. But we have on here like scholars, we have on here graduate students. What do you think is the role of the scholar amidst all the brilliance and expertise of Sonia, of Lorene, of Barry, of Patrice? Like, in what ways is the scholar, you know, should be in service of this movement? And what recommendations do you have for the up and coming graduate student who's like, okay, I've been on this webinar, I'm like, I kind of want to get involved. And what are some action steps or some advice that you have as for more people that want to do this type of work and get involved? And you know you're muted. No.
All right. First of all, I just want to say it's been an honor to be here, to listen to you all and to learn from the work that you're doing, the really powerful analysis and visions that you're offering. And, you know, and that's what is often missing in our schools of education or in our higher education or in our scholarship. And the reality is that, you know, as Sister Sonia was talking about, this is not, it's a cradle to prison pipeline. It's an entire system of white supremacy. It's not what public schools, K through 12 are doing over here. It's happening. And so the way that we conduct our academic life is part of that system, right? It's a hierarchical system that lifts up the value of the knowledge of someone like myself and devalues the wisdom that grows out of community experience and community analysis. It's lived experience, but it's also it's sharp analysis, right? That people are observing the world around them and they have a lot to say about it that's connected to their lived experience. And we disconnect that in the scholarly world. And so, you know, I and my colleagues like Vajra and others, we're trying to chart a different path. And that different path is a challenge. It's a challenge to a system that has, you know, kept people like us privileged in it as well. And so this means that for me, it means, and my advice is to go out into communities, to go out and work with parents and young people. And first of all, to listen. Listen first. I learned about the school to prison pipeline by listening to people in community, parents and young people 15 years ago, not because I read it in a book somewhere. And, you know, that's you know, we forget about that. So I will say to graduate students and early career folks, you know, you're entering the world of research you have the privilege of a lot of autonomy and to pursue your passions. Well, create a meaningful life for yourself. Do something that's really going to be important beyond, publishing an article in a journal that no one's ever going to read, right? Try to do work that's impactful, and impactful, not just by contributing to knowledge, which is important, that is our profession, but knowledge, a regeneration, a new vision of what knowledge can be that really is in service of racial equity and educational justice. And that knowledge has to be produced in a different way than we produce it. And if you do that, you can have a career, but you can have a career that's also countercultural, that's challenging, and that I think will, in the end, transform not just through K through 12 education, but higher education as well.
Thank you for that, Mark. Who we are shapes how we lead. All the scholars featured in our Leading with Justice series are in the top of their discipline. But even more importantly, they seek to embody justice as more than a goal, but a way of life, as do all of our panelists here today. May all of us in this space, in these lunch and learns, in this journey of what it means to lead with justice, feel inspired and invigorated by the information that was shared today. We appreciate you being present with us. We appreciate you staying on a little bit longer. We thank SMUD and the Sacramento Kings and the College of Education for helping make this happen. I personally want to shout out to Parker Scott and Tina Weekly in the EDD office for helping with some of the logistics, as well as the amazing EDD faculty and students who really allow these spaces to be created. I just want to implore everyone to get involved, to really hear the insights and expertise that were shared today. We will send out an email because we have a lot of Mark's new books that we've pre-purchased that we want to get into people's hands as an organizing tool. And Grace Lee Boggs asked us to become solutionaries, to really continue to seed solutions in our daily lives. And this is so much of what this series has been about, that as much as we dismantle and deconstruct and understand the paralysis of these systems, that we are also imagining and creating and building and sustaining and coming kind of full circle to the work. So thank you to all of you so much. With my head, my heart, my feet. If you need anything, the EDD program has you. I got you. And to everyone out there, we wish you a beautiful and safe day. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I think Parker's going to play a little song as we exit. Feel free to use the chat box to keep the conversation going for a couple minutes. Again, thank you, everyone.
Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs, redemption songs.